Hello guys, in this video we are going to learn these 6 very simple functions in Google Sheet. I'm going to make use of these simple Google Sheets for which I provided the link in my first video. You can download these Google Sheets from there and you can follow the examples as I do it in this video. So the first function that we are learning today is the sum function. As you all know, whenever you are writing a function or a formula in Google Sheet, what is the first thing that we have to do? We have to write this equal symbol. And then you have to write the name of the function. So right now we are learning about the sum function. So I'll be writing here sum and then opening parenthesis and the closing parenthesis. But before closing the parenthesis, let me show you something here. As soon as I write equal sum and then these opening parentheses, then what you will see here is this question mark appearing. So here, see, as it is, if I keep my mouse cursor here, it is saying that turn on formula help F1. Either you can press F1 or you can click here. It will give you or it will show you a help menu for this particular formula. Any formula you type, these facility will be there. So basically, you do not need to remember exactly what was the syntax of making use of a formula. As long as you remember the name of that formula, that is enough. Rest of the things or rest of the helps will be provided by Google Sheet automatically. But anyhow, let's see this, what this help menu or how to interpret this help menu. The first thing, the first line is the syntax of that particular function. Syntax means how to make use of that function, like what is the name of the function or what are the inputs this function is expecting. Now here you see here, this value 1, comma, and then it is written within this square bracket, this value 2 is written. See, whenever an input is written within this square bracket, it means that that particular input is optional. If it is not clear right now, as soon as I give you some examples, things will be clear. But for the time being, what you need to remember is that this is the syntax of the function. And now this is like whenever you are using a complex functions where that takes many inputs, then this syntax is going to be very useful for you. Anyhow, let's continue with this sum function. So as I said, since we are writing a function, we are writing here this equal symbol, and then we are writing the name of the function. And one more thing, this name of the function is not case sensitive in the sense that if I can write here SUM in lowercase or SUM in uppercase, that's not a problem. Okay, and then what it is saying, the syntax of this function is saying, the syntax of the function is saying that at least one value I have to specify here. Okay, let's specify a value there. Say for example, I write sum within bracket 12 and I press enter. As soon as I press enter, the value or the result of that particular function will be able to see the result of that particular function in that particular cell where we wrote that function. Now see here, if you want to edit the function, suppose you want to edit, like you want to specify, you want to give a different input or some changes that you want to do in that particular function, then how you can do that? You can double click on that particular cell. As soon as you double click on that cell, you will be able to edit the function. See here, by default, the cell will show you only the value or only the result of that particular function. But if you want to edit that function, what you can do is you can double click on that cell. It will allow you to edit that function. That is one way. And another way is that, see here, as soon as I click on any cell, like here, say here, as soon as I click here, what you can see is that on this particular bar here top, on this particular bar, what you see is the content of that particular cell. You can see here, when I say content, it means the actual content. See here, this particular cell is right now showing you 12. However, if I click here, on this bar I can see the actual content of that particular cell, which is the function there. And I can edit the content of the cell from here, or what I can do is, as I said, I can double click on this particular cell or in that particular cell where no, whose content I want to change. I think these things are clear. So what am I saying is that if you want to edit the content of a particular cell, you can do two things. One thing is that you can simply double click on that particular cell. Say for example, I want to edit the content of this cell. So what I'll do is I'll double click on this cell. It will allow me to edit the content of that cell. Or another way is that I can simply click on that cell, and then from this bar here, I'll be able to edit the content of that cell. Say for example, instead of writing there a 3, I want to write there a 34. See here, as soon as I change the value here, it is reflected here also. Okay, no matter whether you are writing a function or a normal simple value, in both these cases, if you want to edit the content of a cell, these are two things that you can do. Either you can click on that cell and you can address edit the content from this bar, or you can simply double click on that cell and you'll be able to edit the content of that particular cell. These are some some background notes you should know. And anyhow, let's come back to our actual point. Our actual point is learning how this sum function works. Now, the thing is, when I write equal sum 12, it is like the sum of 12 is 12. That is quite logical, I guess, right? Now, suppose it's not that I want to find, like, there is no point of writing something like this, right? I want to find, some actual sum. Like, say, for example, I want to find the sum of 12 and 23. So what I'll do is I'll write sum 12 comma 23 and I'll press enter. So it will give me the sum of 12 and 23 is 35. So this is the result. Now say this is not the this is not the only one way that you can use this sum function. This sum function is actually, you can use it for some more in some more useful cases. What it could be, say for example, in a Google sheet, you have a set of numbers written in a particular column. Say, for example, like this 12, 23, 34, and 45, and minus 90, like that. These are some numbers written in a particular column, or some numbers written in a particular row. So let me write it here. Say the same set of numbers like 12, 23, and then 34, and then minus 45, and then 90. It's not minus 45, minus 90. Okay, whatever. So some numbers are written in a row and some numbers are written in a column. Now our task is, say for example, we want to find the sum of all these numbers. Then how we can do that? So we can make use of the sum function in this way. So since we are writing a function, since we now say, suppose we want to display the sum here. Okay, so what we can do, you can display the sum anywhere. I mean, here also, suppose I want to display the sum of these numbers here. So what I'll do is I'll simply double click here, and then I will make use of that sum function. So first thing that I'll do is I'll write equal sum, and then see here, it is asking for value 1. And what is this value 1? The first number or range to add together. Now see, when you are writing, like, all the time, you do not need this help menu, right? So what you can do is, if you do not need this help menu, you can close this help menu. Okay, and then say our task is that we want to find the sum of these numbers here, right? So what we can do is we can write, okay, the different ways that you can do. Say for the most trivial way, okay, although not very efficient. Let's first start with the very novice way, and that way is that what you can do is, okay, I want to find the sum of this cell, comma, this particular cell, comma, this particular cell, comma, like that. I can mention the all these cells individually. Okay, and then I can press enter. See here, if you add all these different numbers, you should get a 24. Okay, if it is not clear, let's say, let me write here some other numbers, or say I change. See here, the advantage of using the function. Not only it allows you to compute this, sum of a given set of numbers, also as soon as you, this is dynamic also, in the sense that as soon as you change the value of a particular cell, say I change the value of this cell to 1, automatically the sum will be, obviously, as soon as I change the content of a particular cell, then the sum will also be different. So as a result, immediately you'll be, that change in the sum you'll be able to see in your final result. Okay, now let's say I make all these these cell values 1, just to verify whether the result which is displayed here is right or not. Now see here, if I change all of them to 1, I'm getting the sum as 5. So obviously it is giving me the right answer. Now let's change it again. So I make it 10. So this time I'm increasing the sum. The sum should be increased by 9. So 9 plus 5 is your 14. So this cell is showing you 14. So that's the right answer. Now see the advantage here. As I said, now the result of the function is always dynamic. It means as soon as you change the value of the input cells, then automatically the output will also change. Okay, we have seen one way of specifying the or writing the function. What are the other ways? See here in this function, when I wrote this function, I wrote it in this way. Like each cell I have written in like explicitly. But there are some other ways also, some better ways of writing. Let's see what is the better way of writing these same sum function. What you can do is, again, I'll be double clicking on this particular cell. Certainly, I can write it the function here also. But just by first, you have to select that cell, and then you can type the content in this function bar. Okay, that is one way, as I said. Or another way is simply double click on that particular cell. So I'm taking the second approach. I'm double clicking on that cell, and then I'm writing there equal and then sum. And then what I can do is I can click here, and then I can select this entire range. Now see here, I'm selecting a range. That is what I mean is that, or when you write something like this, what does it mean? That we want to compute the sum from the range age 105 to age 109. Now see here, since and I'm like moving very slowly and with very basic things also, like I'm mentioning the very basic things also. One of such basic things is, like here, what does it mean when you write H105? Now see here, this H is actually this particular H, the column name. Here, that letter, whatever that letter is coming, that particular letter is representing the column name. And then this 105 is actually the row number. You see here, this row, 105 is this row. So when you write H105, it means you are talking about that particular cell which is there in column H and row number 105. H105 will always represent this particular cell. Similarly, if I ask you what is the name of this particular cell, then you can say that the name of this particular cell is D105. The name of this particular cell is C116, like that. Okay. Now, okay, anyhow, let's come back to our main point. The another thing that I want to tell you is that, see here, as soon as I click here, this cell name is coming here. And if I drag this thing in this way, what it is, like how these content are, how these, like things are written here, like H105 colon H109. So whenever it is a colon, you understand that thing as a range. That is from cell H105 to cell H109. And this thing is called as a range. A colon B means it is a range from A to B, something like that. Okay. So if you have any doubt here, you can let me know it in the comment section. I'll explain the things in more details. Um, but for the time being, I'll assume that you people have understood the thing. Okay. Now see here, what we can do is, instead of writing two numbers there that we did here, instead of, oh, sorry, instead of writing the input to the sum function in this way, like each and every the name of each and every cell independently here, certainly writing it in this way is not a wrong thing. You always can write it in that way, but there is a shortcut available. See here, these cells are actually in, like in a continuous form. Like see here, H column H, then row number 105, column H, row number 106. Like these are like sort of one after another. So we can mention all these different cells in the form of a range, like say from cell H105 to cell H109. And that is what we're going to do here in this example. So what we can do is we can write here sum, and then instead of mentioning each and every cell independently or explicitly, we can write here a range. And what we can do is, see here, H105. As soon as I write here H105, you see automatically this particular cell is selected. And see the magic here. I'll write here a colon, and then here I'll write H1. See here, H1. Say up to this point, if I write, it means here I'm talking about the range H105 to H1. That's why H105 to all up to H1, everything is selected. But I have not yet done, so I'll change these things from we want up to this point, right? So H109, so H109, and I'll close the bracket. So this is how we can specify the range. See, I can type, or one can type the range this way. Automatically it will select that particular range. Or what one can do is, instead of doing it, what one can do is, one can see both these ways. One can either type, then this part will be done automatically, the selection part will be done automatically. Or what one can do is, one can select like this, and then this typing part will be done automatically. So you can choose any one to do by yourself. Rest, the other one will be done by Google app or Google Sheet application automatically. These are some extra basic things. Since this is the first class, I felt like, it is useful to tell you these extra details also. Anyhow, as soon as I write like sum H105 colon H109 and I press enter, you can see that you are actually seeing the same answer as you saw here, when you wrote the function in this pattern. Okay, obviously both of them will give you the same answer. Having said so, one more thing I want to tell you, that this sum function not only works when these numbers are in a particular column. You can actually specify any range over which you want to find the sum. Say for example, we want to find the sum of all these numbers. Then how we can do it? Yeah, well, just so first thing is, you have to select the cell where you want to display the sum. You can display the sum here, you can display the sum here, you can display the sum here, wherever you want. Or you can display the sum here. Or what you can do is, you can display the sum in a different Excel sheet also, or in a different Google sheet also. That I'll show you in the coming videos. But for the time being, we're assuming that we want to display the sum in the same page where our input data is there. So now our task is, say for example, we want to compute the sum of all these different cells which are there in a particular row. Okay, so what we'll do is, and suppose this is the cell where we want to display the sum, so we'll be double clicking on that particular cell, and then we'll be writing there sum. And then we want to find the sum from here to here. So I prefer this one. I prefer the typing way, because see here, you can easily select. Say I can easily select if the range is very small. But suppose if the range is very big, say for example, like there are 101, like rows are there, and I have to select all these different rows way up to first one. That is certainly time consuming. Here only 100 rows are there. Here things are easy to select by using the mouse. But say for example, you consider this particular example sheet. There, suppose I want to select from these way up to the last row. There are like 2000 rows. Selecting it using this mouse is going to, certainly it is time consuming, right? So that's why, if you want, you can actually, one good thing is that you should practice sometimes writing, not typing the range by yourself. There are certainly there's some shorthand or shortcuts also from the keyboard that will allow you to select a particular range very easily. But then also, sometimes I prefer typing. Okay. Anyhow, let's say we want to find the sum of all these numbers. So what we'll do is, now see, we want to find the sum of all these numbers. So we want to specify the input in the form of a range. So what we can do is, what is our range here? Our range is Z. Again, it is not case sensitive. You can write uppercase, lowercase, that's your wish. So our range is from Z, and call row number 112. So Z 112 up to. So whenever you are writing a range, you have to make use of that colon symbol, that is from and to. Okay, so this is from Z112 to K112. This time, see, column is changing and row is not changing. See here, Z112 to K112. Automatically, this range is selected. Close the bracket and press enter to see the result. And this is the sum of all these different numbers. Now let's say these numbers are not in a row, not in a column. These numbers are sort of like in both way, in both the direction, in rows also, columns also. Say for example, here there are some other numbers, 1, 2, and 4, and then 3, and then 2, and then here again some numbers are there, 4, 1. I'm giving small numbers so that we can verify the result quickly here. And then our goal is we want to find the sum of all these different numbers. There might be some use case where we might have to find the sum of sum of a given set of numbers which are written in this format, right? Like which are spread across rows and columns there. So that is also possible using sum function. How you can do that? You just select the cell first where you want to display the sum. Say for example, I want to display the sum here, and then double click there, write equal symbol, type there sum, and then specify the range. Now, how will you specify what is the range for that selects all these different numbers? Yeah, you can select using the mouse. Suppose without using the mouse, you have to specify it. So okay, we can first thing is, see, whenever you are specifying a range, you have to write like from this particular cell to that particular cell, right? So from which cell we want to find it, that is the first cell name, that is which one is the first cell here in this range. This is the first cell, right? So the name of this particular cell is your age, and then 105, column age, row 105. So I'll be writing here age 105 is selected. So from this particular cell to this particular cell, right? So this is the last cell, and the address of this cell or the name of this cell is J109. So I'll be writing colon J109. See, as soon as I write this range here, automatically this selection will be done by Google Sheet app. And then I'll close, and then I'll press enter. So it will show you the sum of all these numbers. Just to verify it quickly, I'll change this value from 10 to 1, and this one from 4 to 1, and this one from all these I'll make 1, so that I can quickly verify my answer. So there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into 3, 15 cells are there. All of them are having 1, and then this is the result, right? Now if I increase the value of one particular cell by 100, that is I make it 101, as soon as I click outside, then you'll be seeing that result as 115. So that is our sum function that allows you to compute the sum of a given range. Okay, now let's move to our next function, which is the min function. It is another simple function available there in Google Sheet, and that function, what as the name itself indicates, this min function allows you to compute the minimum of a given set of numbers. Okay, let's see how we can make use of this min function. Okay, say we are now making use of this min function. So simply if I write min and open and close, this is one thing that you should take care of. Like simply writing this function name is not going to work, because whenever you are writing a function, always you remember, always you have to make use of this equal symbol. Until and unless you write the equal symbol, it will not be considered as a function. Say for example, here I want to compute the sum of all these numbers, right? So if I simply write here, if I simply write here sum, and within that I write some number H101 colon H105. Now, although I have written everything like right more or less, but since I didn't write that equal symbol, at the starting or at the beginning, these string or these content of this particular cell will not be considered or not be interpreted as a function by this Google Sheet application. It will simply consider this thing as any other text that you write in a cell. So for example, in this cell you can write anything, right? So for Google Sheet application, there is no difference between this text and this text. I mean, this tax is by any means not a special tax compared to this particular text. However, as soon as you write this equal symbol, it indicates, as soon as you write this equal symbol here at the beginning of the cell, now Google Sheet will interpret the rest of the strings or rest of the characters that you type in that cell as some functions to evaluate. Okay, that's just a side note again. But anyhow, now we are talking about these mean function. Okay, I'm making it bold and I'm increasing the size up a bit. Okay, now we are talking about this mean function. Let's see, say for example, we will first see what is this mean function and what does it do. Say we do not know anything about mean function. So what you can do is you can even directly take help from this Google Sheet application. What you can do is you can type here equal and then mean. As soon as you type equal mean, a list of different functions are coming, but right now we are interested on this particular mean function. So you can directly select that or you can press enter. But here my point is that as I said, as soon as you write the name of the function, these question mark comes, this help menu appears, right? If you click on this help menu, I mean that question mark, this help menu will come and it will tell you what is the syntax of the function and like what is the meaning of all these different inputs and all this stuff. So from this syntax, now what we know is that this mean function text needs at least one input, and also it can take multiple inputs, but those inputs are optional. So we'll stick with these. It's like the syntax is more or less like the syntax of some function only. And what this mean function does, this mean function, see here, this about section in this help menu will always tell you what that function does actually. Okay, so for example, this mean function returns the minimum value in a numeric data set, right? Say for example, if you write here min 1 comma 23 comma 45 comma 21 comma minus 90 comma 89, and these are some numeric values over which we want to find or we want to compute the minimum value here. So the minimum here is minus 90. So as soon as I press enter, it will tell me, okay, minus 90 is the minimum value in this given set of numbers. Okay, now again, you can use minimum function in this way also if you need. And another use case could be like, say for example, a range of numbers are given. Say for example, these numbers, and you want to compute the minimum of these numbers. Okay, then what you can do is you can write here, okay, say for example, if you want to compute the minimum of these numbers on this particular cell, you'll be double clicking on it, and then you will write equal minimum, and you'll specify the range. See here, every time you do not need this, anytime you feel like, okay, this window is creating some problem, you can always close it. And then see what is our goal, that we want to compute in this particular cell, we want to compute the minimum of these cells. And see, we can specify these cells as a range as we did with the sum function. So we can write here minimum, and then from which cell to which cell, from cell Z 112, from cell Z 112 to cell K 112, right? So over this range, we want to compute the minimum value. And as you can see here, the minimum is minus 45. So the result should be minus 45. That's what a minimum function does. And again, as it is the case, it was the case with the sum function, it is not needed that your data should be always in a particular direction. I mean, always it should be in a row or it should be in a column. It could be a a rectangular range also. That is, your data is spread across rows as well as columns. There also you can find the minimum. So for example, just to demonstrate, I set this value to be -1, and I set this value to be, say for example, minus 10, and we want to compute the minimum over this range. And as you can see here, the minimum is -10. How we can compute the minimum over this range? Same, you write equal minimum, and then on what range you want to compute the minimum. The minimum we want to compute on this range. So here, this time I'm selecting using my mouse. So as soon as I select that range, this range is automatically filled up here, automatically written here, right? And I just have to press the enter key. As you can see, it is giving us the right answer. That is -10 is the minimum value on this range. And again, as I said, these functions are always dynamic in the sense that if you change the content of any one of these cell, automatically the function will be re-executed, and automatically it will update the result in that corresponding cell. Okay, so for example, the minimum of this range is computed and is computed in this particular cell. So if I change the value of any one of this cell, that should be reflected. Say for example, if I make it say 10, obviously the result is not changed, so as a result the output is also not changed. But here say I make it this 101 from positive number to negative number. As soon as I change that number and I click outside, until and unless you click outside, the function will not compute. But if you click outside, as soon as you click outside, that is, as soon as you go out of the cell, the function will be recomputed. Okay, and as a result, you can see that immediately the result of that function, wherever it is, no matter where it is automatically updated. Okay, that thing you should always realize. I guess this min function is also clear for you people. And then we are ready to move towards our next function, that is your max function. As the name itself indicates, this max function returns you the maximum of a given set of numbers, right? So here again, okay, so I want to tell you one side note here, huh? Now see here, this mean, and I'm writing, it is not about functions and anything. It's about like something that is very useful. Now say this mean is written like in bold, right? And I want to, like I want to make this max also to bold and of equal font size and everything, like this mean text here. So what I can do is I can first click on this cell, and then I can like see what is the font style and what is the size, and whether it is bold or not, or what is the color, and all these different properties I can see, and I can individually specify those properties for this particular text also. That is one way, but that is which is very difficult actually. Okay, the another shortcut here is something called as your format painter. What you can do is you just select this particular cell, and then from where actually you want to copy those different attribute values, like what is the font size, whether it is bold or not, what is the color, and all this stuff, like the source. Okay, you click on the source, and then you see this particular flag symbol here on the left upper corner. Here you will see this paint format. Okay, like this one, this will copy the format from your current cell. And then once you copy the format, you click on the cell where you want to apply that particular format. As soon as you click on that particular cell, the format will be applied. And this feature, this copy format feature, is not only there in Google Sheet, it is there in all these different Google applications, like your Google Doc, Google Slide, and like that. And also it is there in, see here, these Google Doc, Google Slide, Google Sheet, they have some equivalent counterparts in Microsoft Office, right? Like Microsoft Office, Microsoft Slides, that is PPT, PowerPoint presentation, and then Google Slide equivalent is Microsoft Excel. So whatever the functions here I'm discussing, more or less these functions are there in Microsoft Excel also. So you can practice, if you know it here, then you know it there also. Okay, but anyhow, this format painter is like, or this copy format is quite a useful tool. But anyhow, let's come back to our main point. Okay. Now, what this max function is doing is it's same as min function. However, this max function gives you or returns the maximum value on the input range or on the input numbers. Okay. Like how, let's see an example. Let's say I want to compute the maximum of all these numbers. Then how we are going to do it? We're going to write, say, simply the select, first you have to select the cell as I said, and then there you write equal, and there you write max, and then you specify the range over which you want to compute the maximum value. So I want to compute the maximum value out of all these different numbers, so I'll be selecting all of them. I'll close the bracket as yes, and then I'll press enter. So it will tell me, okay, 90 is the maximum present there in this given range. or in this set of numbers. Okay, now suppose I can change this minus 45 to plus 450. As soon as I click outside, since the inputs are somehow changed, obviously the output also might change. Okay, it means what? That function will be re-evaluated or re-executed, and accordingly it will display you the new output in that particular cell. I hope things are making sense to you. So till now, what are the functions we learned? We learned about these sum function first. And see, again, I'm making use of this copy format. Sum function, then mean function, then max function. Then we are ready to move to our next function, and that is your average function. Now, what this average function does here, average function, as the name itself indicates, again, average is actually, if you want to find the average of a given set of numbers, then you can make use of this average function. So how you can make use of this average function? Say again the same thing. You will write, the first thing is you will write equal symbol, and then you will write the name of the function, average, average. And as soon as you open this parenthesis, you will get this question mark there, this help menu option there. You click here and you'll come to know what this average function does. First thing is, again, this is the syntax of writing the function, and this is how you should write the function. And then it returns the numerical average value in a data set, ignoring text. Ignoring text means text will be considered as zero always. I mean, not even zeros. That will, and this average function will ignore that particular cell completely. What I mean by that? Okay, let's see some examples, and then you'll come to know. Okay, so what we want to do, say for example, you have some numbers there. Again, I'm writing from the beginning, say 1, 2, and then 3. I'm writing some simple numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, like that. These are my numbers, and then here I write the some text there, and again here I write, like, say 2 and 1. Okay, and we want to compute the average of these numbers. Okay, like for simplicity, okay, we want to compute the average of these numbers. And what is the average of all these numbers? Average means, there are two ways you can do it. Actually, the average is actually, first you have to find the sum of all these numbers, like sum from this particular cell to this particular cell. Press enter. Now see, sum is also automatically excluding the text part there. Like, see here, from here to this particular function is actually computing the sum from row number 124 to row number 131, right? But since it is a text, like, what is the sum of 5 plus d f f d, it doesn't make any sense. So automatically it will discard this particular row here, okay, or they discard the value of this particular cell. So as a result, we can see that this sum is like 2 plus 1 3 plus 3 6 plus 4 10 plus 5 15 plus 3 is your 18. So we are seeing here the sum as 18. But what is the average of these numbers? Is it like 18 divided by, see here, 18 divided by how many? Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 7, 8 or 7. See, there are like 8 cells there, right? But since this particular cell was excluded, we have to write there, actually, to get the actual average, we have to write there. We know that we have to write there 7. So the average is actually 2.5714, like that. Okay, and this average is not computed by any inbuilt function. We have computed sort of manually. Okay, that is, we are not directly making use of this average function. We just computed it, like, manually, sort of. Okay, now let's do it in one single go. How you can do that? Instead of, you can always find the average in this way. However, you can do it in this way also. Directly you can make use of this function average. So you'll be writing equal average, and then you have to specify these values, like you want to compute the average over this particular range. You close the bracket, press enter, you should get the same answer, 2.571, 2.571. So here automatically this text was discarded. Now, now suppose, okay, later on I realized, okay, I should have written here some values there, but I, by mistake, for some reason, I typed there some text. Now I want to correct my mistake, and I change this text again to some number. Okay, and then suppose I write here that number as 12. As soon as I click outside, as you are expecting, these function will be automatically, re-evaluated. Now let's see, there's a very interesting thing which is going to happen. See here, we are going to see the actual answer, the right answer here, not here. Why? You will come to know. Now see, as soon as I click outside this particular cell, we know that these functions will be re-evaluated, okay? And as a result, what we will see is, we'll see that the average, as here, it is showing us that average as 3.75, whereas it is showing slightly bigger average, 4.28. And why is it so? Because you see here, when we computed that average function, although the sum is right, some will be automatically corrected as soon as we change the value of a particular cell. However, we wrote here explicitly 7 because we realized that one of the cell was not having the right value. I mean, one of the cell was not having the numerical value. So for that reason, explicitly we wrote there as 7, and that is where that problem was coming from. Because although the value of that particular cell is recomputed, this 7 will always remain 7, because the computer doesn't know, like, why did we wrote 7 there, right? It will interpret 7 always as 7. So as a result, this way, if you compute the average, like, some hard-coded way, then you might not get the actual answer. However, this is the actual answer actually. Now we can, like, see here, now as soon as we change the value of this 7 to 8, we'll get exactly the same answer. Like here it is 3.75, here also it is 3.75. Okay, done. I guess this average function also, like, you got the idea of this average function. Now see, again, as it was the case with this min max sum function, this average function you can compute over a range also, like over an area also, area in the sense like where your values are spread across rows and columns, right? Now say, for example, here there are some numbers like 1 and 1 1 3, and I'm not going to, like, verify manually whether the answer is right or wrong. I'll assume that the answer is always right. Now here, say we want to compute the average of all these numbers, okay, of all these numbers. So how we can do that? We can do it in this way, like average, and then specify, correct the range. We want to compute the average. See here, again, this help menu might not be helpful always for you, so in that case, whenever it is creating problem for you, you close this help menu. Now we want to compute the average over this particular range. So how you can do that? You just write the average function and then select the range and press enter. It will tell you what is the average of these numbers. Done. What is the next function? Our next function is, now this function is slightly complicated than this rest of the function, and this function is your SUMIF function. And what does this SUMIF function do, and how it is different from our normal sum function? Okay, we will learn it in a moment. Now let me write it here. Say, for example, we are now learning this SUMIF function. Again, first thing that I want to do is I want to make it bold, and I want to look this SUMIF text as it is here in this case. So what I'll do, I'll copy the format, I'll paste it here in this way. Okay, again, I'm telling you, this is, I use it very frequently, many different times, many different situations. This paint format is quite helpful. Okay, now let's come back to this SUMIF function. So here, these, as the name itself indicates, it's like the two words are there, right? Some word is there, and then there is this word if. Now we know what is the meaning of if in our day-to-day life, like, like if conditions. Whenever we have to, like, say some conditional thing, if you give me that thing, then only I'll do this thing. Or, like, these if things, right? I mean, we use it, right? I mean, every time, like, if you do that, I'll do this, or if I do that, you will do this. That if, actually. Now here, if we combine both these words, literally what meaning comes out? Some if. It means what? sum these values only if a particular condition is satisfied, right? Okay, okay. What actually that means? Okay, first let's see the syntax, or the like what this help menu, which is there in Google app or Google Sheet app, tells us about this SUMIF function. First, try to see that thing, and then we'll proceed. So to get that menu, we have to do is we have to write their equal symbol. Then we have to write the name of the function. We have to open this bracket. As soon as we write this bracket, this question mark will come. If I click here, it will tell me, okay, this is the help for this SUMIF function. This is the like sort of the syntax here. Now see, the syntax is slightly different from the syntax of some function here, right? And what it is, like what this syntax is saying, that like it needs at least two input. One is this range over which you want to compute the like what this range is actually. You see here it is written the range which is tested against criteria. Like against what criteria, like what is the condition, the condition that you want to test on a particular range. Okay, when I'll discuss some example, you will come to know, but for the time being, you just try to remember these lines just for like 1 minute or something. The range which is tested against criterion, that is okay. And then what is the criteria, or what is the condition that you want to check, that you have to write here. And these optional ranges, like these optional means the range to be summed if different from the this particular range. Okay, and these are some examples, like from a1 to a10, check if the value, this is how you interpret actually. See, from A1 to A10, this is the range over which you want to compute these condition. This is the range where you want to compute this condition. You want to check this condition. On this range, if you find any number which is greater than 20, then you compute the corresponding, or you include the corresponding value from this range to sum up. That's quite a lots of thing. But again, see, again, I'm saying you for 1 minute, you try to remember the syntax, the range over which you want to compute the condition. And this is actually is your condition, which you always have to write within this double quotation. And this is the range that you actually want to sum up, that you actually want to add. Okay, having said so, now this help menu, let it go. And then let me give you some example first, and then I'll write this function. Now say for example, you have, say I write here some name, okay? Say I write Ram, and then I write here some numbers there, like say, what? Just, India, and then I write here some number, say 30. And I write here, say, Mrinal, and I write Japan, and then I write here, say, 23. Some more, and Rio, yeah, 30, and then those, yeah, 21. Let me finish writing this thing, and then I'll tell you what is the meaning of all these different words and numbers there. Okay, don't you consider them as age and a person name and which country the person belongs to. You can interpret them that way, but I'll try to give you more meaningful interpretation. Just let me finish writing these names. Say Sonal, and say Japan, and say. Now let's say these are the salesperson, and this is the country where the sales are made. Okay, like sold to country, and this is the quantity of the item. These many items, like the meaning is like Ram sold 30 items, some items, in the country India, to some customer who lives in India. Mrinal sold 23 items to some customers who lives in Japan. And similarly, Andrew sold 30 items to some Indian people who lives in India. And then Manoj sold 21 items who lives in India. And then Sonal sold 10 items who lives in Japan. Say that is these are some data given to you. Say now what you have to do is you have to say okay, if I ask you on this particular data set, you compute what is the total, how many quantities were sold, irrespective of the country, irrespective of the salesperson. I'm just asking you how many quantities were sold. Then the question is very simple, right? If I ask you simply like how many quantities were sold, like how many quantities were sold. So the answer to this question is very simple. You will write, okay, sir, that's very simple. It is like sum of all these different numbers, right? Sum of all these different numbers. What mistake I did? Yeah, sum of all these different numbers, right? And that is like 114 different quantities were sold, uh, that we can say from this data set. But suppose now I change my question a bit. Instead of asking like how many quantities were sold, I ask like this: how many quantities were sold by, now see, I'm putting a condition now, by or to, say, to India. That's the thing. Now here, see, if I ask you this question by looking at this data set, you'll be saying, okay, to India 30, to India another 30, to India another 21. That is, all these numbers we do not have to add. What we have to add is, if the corresponding value here on this particular column is India, then only we have to add that number. If it is not India, anything other than India, we do not have to add that number. Like here, say India, it is India, so we have to include this 30. It is not India, so do not include 23. It is India, include 30. It is India, include 21. It is Japan, don't include this number, right? So that is where the SUMIF function is coming into play. Now what we can do is, say, we can write here, okay, sum if. See here now, conditional summing. Now what we want to do, see here what it is saying, the help menu. First, you have to specify the range, and what this range is, the range which is tested against the condition. Now, this is the range, or this is the column where we want to check our condition, right? So for that reason, what we will do is we will select, okay, the range is this. Over this range, we want to select or we want to check our condition. That is done. My first input is done. Now, what is the second input? It is saying the criterion is like the pattern or test to apply to that range, like what condition we want to check on this particular range, that we have to write it here. And see here, this pattern always you have to write as it is shown in this example within this double quotation. So what we will do is we'll write, okay, what condition we want to check, that if the value of that particular cell, like, you know, in this range, anything which is found as India, we want to include the corresponding value from, see here, this is the condition. We want to check if any value here is same as India. So we are writing here, see, we are writing here equal India. If anything is equal to India, it means our condition is fulfilled. And then the last input, you see, what is the last input? It is saying some range. And what that sum range is, like the range to be summed. Now, from where? Like if the condition is met, okay, the value of this particular cell is India. So as soon as it is a match, then what we want to do is, from where we have to include the value from this particular column. So this is the range which we want to add if this particular condition is met on this particular range. And that's what this SUMIF function allows us to do. Okay, then let's finish this thing. That is, SUMIF over this range, if you find anything like India equal India, then you add the corresponding value from these. What happened? Just a second, I did some mistakes here. Like D20, why did I write D20, 120 equal to? No, yeah. Over this range, if anything is equal to India, then what we have to do is we have to compute this sum from this particular range. Done. Close it, press enter. You will see exactly the result that you were expecting. Say India 30, another India 30, 60 plus 21 is your 81. Right now, suppose this India, I changed from India to, suppose actually Ram sold some items to some Pakistani people, so I'm writing here Pakistan, and then as you can see this 30 is gone from 81, so rest is are like 51. Right, as I change my input, now this is the thing. Okay, so this is how this SUMIF function is doing, SUMIF function works. I hope things are clear. Now again, I can ask you the same, no, I can ask you a different question. Suppose instead of writing this name as Andrew, again, let me change that name as Ram, say. And this is Mrinal, this is Manoj, and this is, again, Mrinal, Mrinal. Now, my question is like, how many items were sold by Mrinal? Right? And you know how to compute the answer. It's like same as the way you compute it. See here, how many items are sold by Mrinal. To get the answer, what we have to do is first we have to check in this salesperson column, like whose name is Mrinal. Like it is Ram, so I do not have to include this corresponding quantity in my sum. So it is Mrinal. So okay, this is the salesperson, about whom the question was asked. So since it is this salesperson name is Mrinal, I have to include his or her sold quantity in the sum. So it is 23. Then again I have to check if there is any other salesperson whose name is Mrinal. Here, okay, again another Mrinal, maybe the same Mrinal or maybe a different Mrinal, but we are interested only in the name. Like if your name is Mrinal, then it's okay, fine for us. Then this row again, says something about some cells made by maybe the same person, Mrinal. So this Mrinal is making another, so selling of like 10 items to some people who lives in Japan, but that is not our interest. So it means here what we want to do is we want to compute some if, and then first thing is, again, see, if you do not remember, always you can take the help of this help menu. Like you have to specify the range over which you want to specify the condition. So first you have to specify the range over which you want to compute the condition. So the range is this. Over this range, I want to compute a condition, and the condition is like if the name or if the value of that particular cell is equal to Mrinal, then I want to include, or I want to sum the corresponding value from this particular range. And then and press enter, you'll come to know, okay, Mrinal has done actually total 23 plus 10, 33. So sellings according to this small data set. Okay, now we are ready to move to our next function, and maybe the last function in this video, and that is your SUMIF function, SUMIFs function. See here, there is an as here, okay, and as you can expect, it means like we want to check multiple conditions. That is, if you give me that, and if you give me that, and if you do that, and if you do not do that, then only I'll do something, like that. Like multiple conditions you are now, you want to now apply. Now let's see this SUMIFs function with some example. Now same, now we are learning here now this SUMIFs function here, SUMIFs function. Okay, and I want this text to look like exactly as this particular text, and then I'll copy this format from here and I'll apply it here. Again, this is not related to the function thing. Again, I'm telling you, this is just like this copy format. You can try. I mean, it is quite a useful tool, although simple but very useful. And again, now let's now come back to our main point. Like, what is this SUMIF function doing? Now, it is same as, more or less same as your SUMIF function. However, the difference is that these SUMIF functions allows you to compute the sum of a range based on multiple conditions. That as you can think of, like the plural version of these SUMIF function in some sense. Okay. Now let's first try to see what Google Sheet Help has to tell us, yeah, about the SUMIFs function. Okay, so what we will do is we'll write here equal sum ifs and then open this bracket. As soon as I type up to this point, then this question mark is coming. I'll click here to get the help, and now you see here this is the syntax of this sumifs function. Now what it is saying, that now see the first input is sum range. Okay, and what is this sum range means? The range to sum. It is slightly different from your SUMIF function, huh? Like you compare the syntax of both these two different functions, then you'll realize. But anyhow, don't worry. Only thing that you need to remember is how to interpret this. Like once the syntax is given to you along with this description, you should be able to make sense. If you can do that much, then basically you do not have to remember like always like what is like what was the like proper way of writing a function. Although if you remember some of them, it is good. Certainly it will increase your speed and confidence as well as. But anyhow, since we are the beginner, so I think like taking help from this help menu is not a like it is quite useful. I in fact encourage you people to take help from this help menu. Okay, now let's come back to our point. Now here, what it is asking, what this help menu is saying, that the first input, this first input should be your see here, this is sum range, is the range to sum over which you want to compute the sum. Okay, and then what are the other inputs? Criteria range 1, criteria range 2, criteria range 3, like that. Multiple criterias you can specify, out of which two conditions you always, like two criteria range you always have to specify. Sorry, here this is criteria range and this is the criteria. Okay, that is, see here, this is the sum range, is like sort of the range over which you want to compute the sum. Criteria range is like over which you want to compute the criteria, and this is the criteria which you want to compute. You can read it from here. Criteria range is like the range to check against condition 1, and condition 1 or criteria 1 is the pattern or test to apply to criteria range 1. Similarly, these two patterns you can actually repeatedly apply. Like again, you might have another range over which you want to check another condition, another range, another condition, like that. Okay, now see, if you want to write only up to this much, then that can be done by some if function also. If it is only one range over which you want to check only one condition, then you can make use of some if function. But if you have like multiple conditions to check and you want to compute the sum, then you can make use of this SUMIFs function. Okay, let me show you some example again that will make your, that will that will help you understand the things in a more appropriate way. The first thing is that we want to, okay, let me first ask you some questions which basically cannot be answered by some if function. If I ask you this question, then certainly it can be, it is very simple actually. This question can be asked this question can be answered by a simple sum function. However, for these two questions, we had to make use of this SUMIF function, because both these two questions were sort of asking us like to perform a sum operation based on some condition, like how many quantities were sold to India, or how many items or quantities were sold by some person, some salesperson, say Mrinal, right? So for that reason, we had to use that SUMIF function, isn't it? Now suppose let's try to answer the same question, like how many quantities were sold to India, but not by using some if function, but by using some ifs function. Okay, let's do it. Equal to some ifs, and then let's see what is the syntax. Like according to the syntax, what are things that we have to specify? Some range you have to specify. It means the range over which we want to compute the sum. The range to sum, so the range to sum is this much, so we have specified that thing correctly. Done. And what is the next thing that we have to specify? We have to specify criteria range 1, that is the range over which we want to compute the condition. We want to check the condition, and what condition we want to check, like how many, or like how many quantities were sold to India. It means this is the range over which we want to compute the condition. So we'll be writing like that, like this is the range, so that we have to specify here. We did it. And then the third thing that we have to specify is, and see, all of them are mandatory. Since they were not written within any square bracket, it means all these three parts of the input are mandatory. You must have to specify them. Okay, and the third part of the input, the minimum third part of the input, is like the criterion one. That is what, and what it is, the pattern or test to apply to criteria range one. That is, what condition we want to check here on this particular range, that condition we have to write here, and that condition we always have to write within double quotation as part of the syntax. And what is that condition? That condition is that, like, see, how many quantities were sold to India. It means wherever the value of this particular column is equal to India, that we want to compute the we want to take the corresponding value from this range in our sum. Let's see whether both these two functions whether this particular version of function gives us the same output or not. I press enter, I get same 51 output. But see here, this function is like something like, first you have to specify here, see, first you have to specify the range where you want to compute the you want to apply the condition. See, the range which is tested against the condition, and this is the condition, no problem, and this is the range where you want to compute the sum. However, in this case it is different. The sum if case, the first range is like the range is like the sum range here, and second range is only the range where you want to compute the condition, and the third one is actually the condition. Okay, and all these you have to specify according to, like, no, and you do not have to, like, how we, you might be thinking, sir, how do you remember? There's some logic, certainly. If you think for a moment, you will come to know like why things are why things you have to specify the way you have to specify. But then also this help menu, from this help menu always you'll come to know, like, what are the inputs you have to specify, in which order you have to specify those inputs. Okay, now let's try to, for some practice, now try to answer the same question using sumifs function. Okay, again, equal sumifs, and then I do not need this help menu anymore, so I'm closing it. Sumifs. The first thing is that the range over which we want to compute the sum. We want to compute the sum over this particular range. Okay, done. And then the next thing is that, like, the range where we want to compute the checking, like the condition. We want to apply the condition over this particular range. We want to compute the, or we want to apply the condition. And the last one is like what condition we want to apply. The condition is that if the name is equal to Mrinal, so we'll be writing here equal to Mrinal, and close it. Done. You should get the same answer. Now see, we are actually both these two answers, these two questions, like we are answering these two questions using actually, see, the same question we are answering using two different approach. One is the SUMIF approach, one is the SUMIFs approach. Similarly, here also doing the same thing. This same question, basically, we are answering using SUMIF and SUMIFs. Then you might be thinking, sir, what is the needs of two different functions? These questions can be answered by both SUMIF and SUMIFs. But there are some questions, like if I ask you this question now, so for example, how many items were sold by Mrinal? That is okay. By Mrinal or by, say, Ram. By Ram to India. That is a question, sir. Here, how many items are sold by Ram to India? Now, two different conditions. One is that salesperson should be Ram, and the second condition is that selling the item should be sold to an Indian person. Two different conditions. Here also it should be like, here in this particular column the salesperson should be Ram, and in this particular column the country should be India. So although here it is see, Ram is selling some items to some Pakistani people, so this is not a this particular number should not come into the sum, right? Because it is like we have to consider only those rows where, basically, we have to consider only those rows where selling is made by Ram to Indian people. So in this particular row, although selling is made by Ram, but since it is to some Pakistani people, we do not have to consider that particular row in our sum. And again, here it is certainly not a match because the salesperson itself is not Ram. Here, the salesperson is Ram and he is making a sale to India. So certainly this particular number should come into the sum. And then in these two rows, we do not have any, the salesperson as Ram, so we can discard them. But say for explanation purpose, suppose this is also Ram. Say this is also Ram. In that case, and this is also India. Say, okay. In that case, we have to see there are three rows where Ram is making some sell. However, in the first row, the selling was done to to some country other than India. So for that reason, we do not have to include that particular number in our sum. However, for these two rows, it is a match: Ram and India, Ram to India, Ram to India, Ram to India. So the sum will be manually. Even if we do, then we'll come to know okay, 30 plus 10 is your 40. 40 is the answer. Now see here, this question, if you try to answer this question using SUMIF, it is not possible because SUMIF do not have that option of specifying multiple conditions, multiple criterias and multiple criteria range. Now see here, if we try to write this function using SUMIF, let's see what are things that we can specify in SUMIF. That the range, and range means the range which is tested against criteria. See, only three input: range, criteria, and then some range. But the thing is that only one range we can specify and only one criteria we can specify. But here we have to specify two ranges. Like on this range, you have to specify if the on this range the value is equal to Ram, and on this range if the value is equal to India, then only you have to take the corresponding value from this particular range, right? So it means multiple range and multiple criteria you have to specify, which we cannot do using this SUMIF function. So for that reason, what we have to do is we have to make use of some ifs function. Now, as soon as I write this function as SUMIFs, now it allows us that thing. See, first is sum range. Sum range is always one. Like, okay, from this range, we want to compute the sum. However, what are the things it allows us to do? Criteria range 1 and criteria 1. And optionally, you can specify multiple criteria range and criteria option. Criteria range and criteria pair, as many as you want. Not only two, it may be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, as many as you want. Okay, so now let's try to answer this particular question using this SUMIFs function. So I'll be writing SUMIFs, and then first thing we have to specify is sum range. What is the range over which you want to compute the sum? This particular range. Okay, and then the next thing is criteria range 1, and this is our criteria range 1, so I specified that thing that way. And then what is the criteria? The first criteria is sold by Ram. It means if the value of this particular range is equal to Ram, then our first condition is met. And then we want another condition. And so for that reason, what we'll do is criteria range 2 will specify, and that range is this. On this range, again, we want to check another condition where the name of the country is equal to India. So if both these two conditions, are met, then we want to take the value from this corresponding range and we want to add them up. And that's what a SUMIFs function does. And if I press enter, you'll see that this Ram is selling to India 30 quantity, this Ram is selling to India 10 quantity. As a result, I'm seeing here a 40. Now suppose this is also not Pakistan, again this is like say again India. In that case, it will be same as Ram selling quantity. This 30 will also come. So as a result, you are going to see 70 there. Now suppose this one is not India, this one is say for example say Bhutan. I'm writing only our neighboring countries names. And this is say for example Sri Lanka. And say this is only this consignment was only to India. So as a result, here we are getting the result as 30. Okay, so that is what this SUMIFs function does. Hope you people have understood all these 6 different functions and what are the different situations where you'll be using these different functions. If you have any queries or doubts or anything, then you people can let me know it in the comment section. See you guys with a new video. Till then, have a nice day.